I'm Craig Gillis, immediate past district governor, and I'm honored to be moderator for this session. What does it take to be part of a facilitation team? And I'd like to thank you so much for attending today's session, led by the distinguished past district governor, Richard Clark, transplanted treasure from Toronto.
Well, Craig, thank you very, very much for that. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session around facilitated training. I thought we'd start with just going through the learning objectives that we're going to try to accomplish in the next 55 minutes or so. So as you can see on your screen, a bit of an insight into facilitated adult learning, a look at the role of the facilitator, and a little bit of a discussion around the district training facilitation opportunities there are in 5020 from time to time. So in terms of an agenda, we're going to look at facilitated learning. We're going to look at adult learners and their learning preferences, a little bit about the facilitator's roles and competencies, those district training opportunities I mentioned, and then look to facilitator techniques before we wrap up this afternoon. So facilitated learning, what is it? It's really the art of bringing adults together to achieve the intended learning objectives in a very positive, adult-friendly environment. Research shows that, and you probably have all experienced this, that adults learn best when certain conditions are present, conditions that are different than traditional instructor-led classes. Adults are ready to learn when they sense a need to cope with real-life situations, or in our case, real-life Rotary situations. Adults tend to be goal and task-oriented. Adults learn best when they take charge of their learning. And adults engage in learning with unique and often extensive prior knowledge that will aid or sometimes inhibit the learning. We all carry baggage with us. Some of it's positive, some less so. Adults who have an opportunity to test and apply new knowledge and skills in the learning environment, where that's possible, are more likely to change their behavior. So facilitated learning is designed to create a learning experience that is geared to active participation. Now, what about facilitators? What about learning facilitators? Who are they? Well, I think a facilitator is a guide to assist the participants in the learning experience. In doing so, the facilitator creates the right learning environment that I just spoke about, helps the learners draw on previous experience, helps them learn from one another. The facilitator actually shares control of the learning event with the learners, and they all share knowledge of the subject as required, and often as not, the facilitator learns along with the attendees. In my mind, it's a little bit like a tour guide who travels with the tourists, sharing the actual travel experience while leading the group in the contracted or agreed upon direction that they chose to go on, gives suggestions how to enhance the experience, points out things that are of interest, keeps peace amongst the group, and also ensures the safety of the travelers. Let me illustrate this a little bit by looking at the difference between facilitation, gain in knowledge. So what do you think that means in a practical sense? Give that a thought while I line up Bill Wilder's presentations on instruction versus facilitation.
This is Bill Wilder, Director of the Lifecycle Institute, author of the People First column. Today I want to talk to you about instructors, or facilitators as we call them here at the Institute. But you would probably hear the term instructor. And that would be right. For most of the time, or often in the class, that's exactly what you want, an instructor. Someone who is a content expert. They're coming in, they're bringing the knowledge, and you are there to absorb that knowledge and embrace that knowledge. Typically, the instructor would deliver that to you in the form of a lecture. Perhaps some PowerPoint slides, but essentially a one-way communication back to you, with you as the participant sitting passively absorbing that information. The content expert or instructor maintaining control of what is being taught, what is being said, and what is being learned in the class. And the participant being required to adapt their behavior and understanding to fit the content that the instructor is sharing. We refer to the instructor as a sage on the stage. And there is clearly a place for an instructor. I could give you an example. If you're learning a process that's an already well-defined process, if you were learning CPR, for example, you're not looking for someone to bring everybody in the room and everybody debate how to do CPR. What you're looking for is bring everybody in the room and teach them the proven, already defined process for doing CPR. That would be the role of the instructor. At the Institute, we work with adult professionals who have specific needs, and we work with defining processes and learning new skills and knowledge that often require the skills of a facilitator. A facilitator is different in that the facilitator is more of a process manager than they are a content manager. So their role is to enable and facilitate a process whereby the people in the room, the participants, actively engage in learning together and access their prior knowledge and use that for the good and the learning of everyone in the room. So the idea is that these folks come into the room, oftentimes they're working professionals that have been in their job for many years, they've had experiences, they've had education that perhaps even the facilitator has not had, that would be of value to others in the class. Or the contrast to that, of course, is they may come in with experience that has established in their head a mental model or a paradigm that is in fact contrary to what is now accepted as best practice. The earlier that surfaced and mitigated, the better off that whole classroom experience will be for the people in the class. And so the whole idea of the facilitator is that rather than the participant adapting to accept content that's been delivered, they are sharing and learning together in a collaborative learning environment. We refer to the facilitator as the guide by the side.
So adult learners, as I said before, adults need to know why they need to know the material being covered. How is it relevant to them? Will it help them in a practical way? Adults, I think even more than teenagers, resist being told what to do. Adults learn best, as we've said, when they're actively engaged. And adults learn from trial and error. We often learn more from our errors than we do from our successes. Adults learn better when they can link back to their current knowledge and their previous experiences. And adult learners use all of their senses, and sometimes common sense too. And adults want feedback, especially younger adults. However, for all of those, just remember, it really starts with why. Why am I doing this? Why do I need to learn this? And how am I going to use it? Humans tend to have learning preferences. Visual learners better take in and process information from what they see. Auditory learners better take in and process what is heard. And kinesthetic or physical learners take in and process through direct involvement, literally hands-on. I'm going to use my own case as my own story as an example. I've never been a big fan of conferences with a long list of speakers. During my career, I was often encouraged to attend professional conferences, and my usual line was something like, yeah, but if I'm lucky, I might learn one thing from one of the speakers. So it's a lot of wasted time and money, but I would go reluctantly. But frequently my attendance at Rotary conferences would be brought up to point out my inconsistency. And I would always respond that yes, but there's a lot more to a Rotary conference than just talking heads. It wasn't until I was getting involved in the Rotary Leadership Institute and learned about learning, because I'm not a teacher, that I realized that I'm a visual and a kinesthetic learner and clearly not an auditory learner, which I am sure all of my ex-marital partners would attest to. In any class, you will most likely have a mix of folks with different learning preferences. And as you won't likely know whom is which, it's good to design your session to include learning opportunities that take those three learning preferences into account. Fortunately, most of us learn to some degree or another from all three ways, despite our personal preferences. So I just want to talk a little bit about the facilitator's roles and what you think they might be. There are 5 or 6 roles that you have as a facilitator. One is to manage the schedule. Another is you're kind of the group leader. A third is the role model. A fourth is around content expert. So you need to know something about the content you're trying to facilitate. And then finally, as a consultant, when people are working on, if you're using activities, you can kind of act as a facilitator. We wanted to, I'm going to unshare here, folks, because we wanted to spend a bit of a moment of having a bit of a chat about what the district training facility opportunities there are. So, Craig, if you can unmute Natalie.
I'm unmuted.
Are you unmuted?
Yep.
Perfect.
Perfect. So, Natalie, what would be some of the opportunities the district youth program might have for training facilitators?
I mean, speaking for myself, as I'm the vice chair for the youth exchange program, separate from the youth services committee. But things that we need facilitators for, just purely in meeting facilitation, could use some support there. How to have an effective meeting. Youth mental health awareness, just in a general sense, not tackling one specific issue, but youth mental health awareness is a bigger and bigger topic. And yeah, those are the two biggest things for me.
All right. And Craig, wearing your many hats, club visioning, RLI, anything else from district training?
Well, I really think that we are on the cusp of some really new ways of looking at our leadership development in the district, and those of you who have been through president-elect training are probably going to find it is quite different in that we've heard for some time that there was concern that people had too much to learn while at PETS. It was too much to digest. So the curriculum development team now is looking at putting a lot of what they call the core competencies like membership and foundation and public image as online learning, and then using the time at PETS to focus on facilitation. And so what the preparation is going to be is teaching assistant governors how to work with their presidents in a facilitative role so that there can be less talk and more interaction at the club level. So we're pretty excited. You've got District Governor Mo in this group right now, and she's going to head up a visioning team and looking at things quite differently, I think, because we were finding that clubs would go through visioning and then they would get stuck at the action stage. So there's going to be a lot more focus on how do you move from ideas and thoughts to actual action. In terms of the Rotary Leadership or Learning Institute, we're going to be borrowing largely from District 5060 because they've got a very interactive facilitator development program. And we're going to be trying to launch that. We're still in the research stages, but launch that in July. So if people are interested in visioning, if they're interested in being a training leader in the district, if you're interested in RLI, just go to that directory and make sure that you know who to contact. Maureen would be your visioning contact. I would be the RLI contact. Any of the committees that you would like to be involved in, we will find ways to have people connect. So we're all about leadership development. We're all about skill development. And I think there's great opportunities.
All right, thanks, Craig. One last question. I know we're in kind of what I'm calling fluid and flexible times. Do you see any need for facilitated trainings in the first 6 months of the new Rotary year?
Is that question to me?
That's question to Natalie.
To Natalie. There she is. She's going to unmute. Yeah.
I think, as you call it, the fluid situation, we're all, I think, everyone, everywhere, in all aspects of our lives, we're going week by week trying to figure out what we're needing. So at this point, I couldn't pinpoint something, but I would definitely invite this group, if there's somebody that thinks they have something to offer to the youth exchange program and the youth services program that Michelle Doyle heads up, I really welcome you to contact us.
All right, thanks, Natalie. Craig, last word to you.
Same question. I really think that we are in the process of being able to design what our Rotary Leadership program is going to look like. And we want to have the very best. We've got some great young trainers and some seasoned veteran trainers within our district. And we would like to make sure that we get this opportunity out to as many Rotarians in the district as possible. So if people have ideas, we're right now in that process of developing. So it's not as if we're going to hit the ground running. We've got to do a lot of thinking about what this newer program is going to look like. So anybody's input is valued input.
Okay, Natalie and Craig, thank you so very much for sharing that. Wanted to spend a couple of minutes very briefly on facilitator competencies. So some of the things that we look for in a facilitator is someone who's always prepared for a training delivery, someone who creates a positive learning climate, someone who's able to establish credibility as a facilitator, someone who's is able to adapt their teaching to what participants know and how they learn, who's able to stay focused on the learning objectives through the training session, the learning session, is able to facilitate learning by encouraging the active participation of the folks taking the course, and employs a variety of teaching tools and techniques as they facilitate, and of course ensures their learning outcomes. In some cases, you may be required to develop the curriculum, but most often you will be given the material to cover, and in some cases, a suggested way to organize and deliver it. But in the end, it is the facilitator's responsibility to orchestrate the learning event.
Richard,
yeah.
I see if we have a question from Matt Breedlove. Go ahead there, Matt.
Thank you. I was just sending you a chat message. I'm very interested in the facilitator and instructor portion of being involved in Rotary. I'm a Toastmaster, have been for years, and know that Toastmasters International and Rotary have been started to work together this year. And you'd mentioned, I think my question was answered though, as far as a list of people to contact or what direction to take if we want to pursue this, that'll be sent to us. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll include that along with a couple of other things that I'll send out probably tomorrow after this session.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see me on your screen, but this wonderful directory that we have each year that can be downloaded is also a great contact for any committees or any groups. So that should always have the most current chair of any committee listed for contact purposes.
That's the old book we had, right? Now you said it's
yes,
online.
That's right.
Where do you find it online?
I think if you just go to our website and Google district directory,
okay,
or search district directory, it should pop up.
Having looked at competencies a little bit, I would like to call on Karen Friedman to give you a little bit of her take on some facilitator tips. How do I expand this?
Hi, I'm Karen Friedman. Have you ever watched a good facilitator? If you have, they probably make it look easy, right? Well, it's not quite as easy as you might think. Good facilitators are expert at stimulating discussion, generating ideas, and certainly producing outcomes. There are many ways to do this, but in this month's video, let me just explore a few tips with you, starting with preparation. Prepare in advance. That means putting yourself in the seats of your listener to understand the outcomes they're after and the types of questions that might spark a discussion. Second, define the purpose of the meeting you're holding at the top. That means saying something like, the reason we are here today, or the purpose of the meeting is this, and in the next 45 minutes we'll do that. Or maybe something simple like, we will begin by. It is imperative that you establish a group consensus so everyone knows what outcome the group is after. You have to be perfectly clear if you want to lead the session effectively. Third, ask questions that prompt discussion. Here are a couple of examples. What would happen if we did this? In your experience, what do you think? Or tell me about, perhaps. So you've suggested, or what do you think about that? What ideas do you have about this? When you think through some of these questions in advance, think through the possible answers as well, and this will help you prepare follow-up questions in advance. It's also important to make sure that everyone is participating. If someone's quiet or they appear left out, try to move the discussion toward them using their name and asking them one of those questions to figure out what it is they think so they provide input. You want to try not to get stuck or bogged down in someone else's issues. It is your role to keep the conversation moving, and you have every right to say, you know, given our time constraints and that we have a lot to cover, let's go back to that. But for right now, we need to move on. Flip charts. You should have flip charts and markers in the room at all times so you or someone else can write down ideas, thoughts, and key words. And finally, just as you stated your goals at the top, make sure to summarize what was accomplished, state the next steps or action steps at the end. That's what will produce results. Until next time, I'm Karen Friedman.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I will also send links to Karen's YouTube video, so if you want to do some more homework, you can. Just a few facilitation basic rules. One, know your audience. We were sort of squeezed for time today, but normally I would have started a session with a little bit of self-intros of everybody who's participating as an icebreaker, but it also gives you an opportunity to learn a little bit about who's going on the learning journey with you. So you can ask something simple like, how long you've been in Rotary, which club are you from, do you have some particular interests? That gives you a bit of a head start. Try to make sure that you give complete instructions for each exercise. Basically, explaining orally is a good practice, but it's also a good, even better practice to have those instructions visible during the exercise if you can. If you're doing it with people in person in a room, you can put them up on a flip chart or something like that, or on a slide that stays up during the exercise. Managing time to maximize learning is a real challenge always. So use the experience that you have. If you're doing something new, give yourself a bit more time. It usually takes more than you think. Aligning breakout groups. So we use Zoom to just arbitrarily send you off into different groups. But on other occasions, you might very well want to organize groups in a particular way. So for example, the more controversial the issue, maybe the smaller the group. I've found that through RLI, when you're doing multi-club events, it's really good often to do it by size of club. So the smaller clubs, the middle-sized clubs, the larger clubs, because their realities are a bit different. You should try to monitor the breakout groups and see how they're doing and give them some guidance, provide some time checks as you go along. And sometimes, of course, in a session, you'll get a little bit of disruptive behavior. The most important thing to remember is not to take it personally and not to get drawn into a debate. That's where that old parking lot can come in handy. It's good to always remember it's important to be that guide at the side and not the sage on the stage. And ensure that people have time to have their say, but find ways to bring the focus back on the learning program and the learning plan. As we run through the clock here, I would like to just go back where we started. And here are 6 tips to adult learning. Take a moment while I set this up to reflect on the last hour. What do you think some of those might be? Craig, are there any questions in the chat line?
No, I think, well, one of the questions from Megan actually was about what the time commitment might be in one of these roles. And I would recommend that what you do is contact the person who's responsible for whether it's vision or RLI or foundation or whatever area you might be working in, and see if you can get an estimate from them, because I think it's a real sliding scale depending on the number of people that are involved in the team and basically the area that they might be covering. So that would be my recommendation, but please ask, okay.
And Craig, actually, I've got a question for you that you may not be fair to ask you, but the question that we were asked before, 2 questions ago, around Toastmasters, is there any work being done at the district level to connect with local Toastmasters clubs?
You know, it's been, I would say it's been very grassroots to date. You know, a number of clubs have invited speakers from Toastmasters, but I haven't seen a formal program. District Governor Maureen might have seen something more recently. They've just made us aware that there is a formal partnership. It was announced 1.5 years ago. And I think it's small steps right now, but really encourage people, if you have a local Toastmasters, to make connections with them and bring them in to share what they do and how they do it.
Okay, thank you for that. So folks, I've tried to pack some of what would normally be in like a 6-hour session into 1 hour and do it on Zoom. So we tried to demonstrate some of the things that one would normally do when one is facilitating a session. But what we were trying to do was to provide you with a bit of an insight into facilitated adult learning, a teaching methodology or learning methodology that Rotary's adopted globally. Provide a taste of the role of a learning facilitator and an idea, at least, of the opportunities to serve in the facilitator role in our district. I hope that one takeaway from the past hour is you can see that learning and training facilitators have a multiple roles. They can be acting as a catalyst to engage the participants in active learning, at other times acting as a coach or a consultant, and throughout the learning event, sort of like a conductor, pulling the best out of participants, ensuring everyone is contributing and that everyone is following the program. So I want to thank you for spending your time with us for this last hour and your interest in the subject.